In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Ghost, amen. Come, Holy Ghost, with the hearts of thy faithful, and enkindle them the fire of the divine love. Send forth thy Spirit, and the heart shall be created. Let us pray, O God, and disinstruct the hearts of thy faithful, by the light of the Holy Ghost. Grant the gifts of the same Spirit, and we be always truly wise, and ever rejoice in his consolation through Christ our Lord. Amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
St. Pius X,
Pray for us.
Our Lady, seat of wisdom.
Pray for us.
In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Ghost. All right, so first things first, you'll notice that we've increased our number of books that are for sale for the MI Corner. We've brought some of them back from the States. When I was there recently, we were able to get pretty good price on some of them. The missals for Mass, $75. We were able to get them back at a good price. So we don't have lots of them, but while the supply lasts, you're welcome to purchase those. This is a good little book, which I think kind of introduces the topic for next year's catechism. So this is officially our last catechism for this year. We'll take a break for a month or two and then pick up again when the new school year starts. It allows everybody kind of get a little bit of a breather. It allows me to prepare another year's worth of classes, at least part of the classes. But my plan right now is next year to spend several months on the liturgy, particularly the Tridentine Mass, all right, the traditional Latin Mass, its significance, its history, its prayers. It's so rich, the Holy Sacrifice of the Mass. We'll do that for several months, and then once we've seen in depth the beauty and the significance of the true Mass, then we'll look at the problems of the new Mass and why we make a stand and say, no, it doesn't express what it should express. There are difficulties. It does weaken the faith of many. All right? It does contribute to a confusion in our world. And of course, that's a big statement to make, to say that any Mass on earth could actually do some damage to souls. We know that's making a bold statement. And that's why we have to be willing to show why we say what we say there. Right? So I don't think we can do that so effectively unless we have a chance first to look at what the Mass is, what it actually is, and what it's meant to express, and how it's meant to impact us. Then it's easier to understand where let's say the new Mass, we could say, sins by omission. Right? It's not so much what is said in the new liturgy, it's what is left unsaid that ends up doing damage. So we have to look at the truth first. So this little book is very good. It was written by Father Matteo Crowley-Bovey. He's the great apostle of the Sacred Heart, famous for spreading the devotion to the Sacred Heart throughout the world, especially enthronement of the Sacred Heart in the home, right, in the families. He did that worldwide. Let's say, I don't know that he traveled everywhere. His movement went worldwide. I'm told at one point, if memory serves, I think it was St. Pius X, who at one point he said, "Your Holiness, would you bless my continuing this work of preaching the enthronement of the Sacred Heart?" And St. Pius X said, "No, I do not approve your doing it. I command you to do it." All right? I don't just approve it, I command you to continue it. Right? So it really has had a tremendous effect. He's the one who wrote this little summary of the Mass. And obviously this was before the new Mass even existed. Right? So there are a good number of copies of this over there. There are also, I think I bought 50 copies. They're not all over there yet, but I have them. I think about 50 copies of what we call the Ottaviani Intervention, which is a hard-hitting summary written by a great theologian, all right, by a number of theologians, but submitted by a great theologian of the Church to the Pope before the new Mass even hit the altars, where he said, "Look, this is a major problem. What is being promulgated by Rome is a major problem. It contradicts in practice what the Council of Trent has said on many areas. Right? It goes against the spirit of the Council of Trent in many areas. Please reconsider. Right? It's still one of the hardest hitting documents in succinct form that we have on the problems of the new Mass. So between this book and that book, if you were to read those, for example, over the summer, well, it'll put you in a good position for next year. If you haven't had a chance to read them in full, both of them, then I would start with this one, because the whole first part of the year we're going to be covering not necessarily this book, but the Tridentine Mass. Yes.
Excellent article on the back of the bulletin this week. If you haven't read it, Father, we have some more of that. Good for apologetics.
Yeah, that's what we can see. I mean, it's each time we're finding things, putting them on there. So it's good though that you liked it. That's great. All right. So tonight, the topic, since we've already finished our section on the, we've already finished our book, The Map of Life, and this is the last class. So I thought, well, what can I give you that kind of stands on its own? And I thought I would simply stand here and tell you to be quiet, right? To practice a certain silence. If you want, this catechism class is more or less just a catechism on a point or two of the spiritual life. We have, of course, doctrinal, the doctrine that we need to study and we've studied all year. There's also, we could say, a real catechesis of the interior life, of the spiritual life. And it's essential. And here we are in this time of Advent, where we are meant to be joining Our Lady, and we're meant to be joining all the prophets and let's say patriarchs of the Old Testament in their waiting and longing quietly for the Messiah. For them, years and years and years. For us, a few weeks. All right, but we really need to have this desire, and we have to prepare for Christmas with a certain spirit of silence, like Our Lady. All those 9 months, as she carried our Lord in her womb, those 9 months she spent in quiet communication with the Son of God, who is within her. You know how it is with a mother, all right? A mother, when she conceives a child, her whole life, even before the child is born, becomes child-centered. Everything she eats, everything she drinks, everything she does, she's thinking about the child within and how it's going to affect that child. And is that child all right? And of course, she's going to dispose her day based on love for that child. And Our Lady would have been no different. On the contrary, she is the best of mothers. It was a 9-month contemplation, if you want, right, in preparation for the Nativity. So we want to join her there. Of course, silence is the condition, really, for prayer. There has to be a certain silence, interior and, let's say, exterior and interior. So we'll talk a little bit about this. This was originally a talk that I gave in St. Mary's, Kansas, at a high school graduation. So keep that in mind as we go. I thought, well, I'm not going to rewrite it. It's something I prepared years ago, but the lessons are still pertinent. So, I'll adapt it a little bit for the crowd here. But if it sounds like I was speaking to high schoolers, well, I was. The first thing I'd like to mention is it's a quote from a Carmelite named Richard Madden, Father Richard Madden. He wrote a book called Men in Sandals, all about the contemplative vocation of the Carmelite priests. And I took this quote from that book. He's speaking about one of the great prophets of the Old Testament, who is known as a rather turbulent man, right? Elias in the Old Testament. The prophet Elias found God where he least expected him. Elias was a complete extrovert, a rugged, brawling servant of the Lord. He used a harsh, violent display of power to overcome his enemies. Zeal poured from him as he thundered across the plains of Palestine. But he looked for God in the wrong places. He tried to find him in his own personal type of element, in the storm, in the earthquake, the fire. and he never found God until he slowed himself down and looked elsewhere. Finally, it was the soft, gentle breeze that brought God to him. In the silence of the desert, he found God. Probably that is where all men must find him. Right? It's a good place to start. We live busy lives. There's a lot of noise in the modern world. And a lot of it is exterior. We have to be men of prayer, and therefore we have to be men of silence. We have to know how to look for God. And God is, of course, God is everywhere, but God is found when we find silence. What's amazing is you can get souls that are practiced in the interior life, and they can find silence in the midst of a busy city. Whereas you can find souls who are not interior, and they can't find silence even in the chapel. They wouldn't be able to find silence even in a monastery. Because it's not just the exterior. The exterior does have an impact on us, but ultimately we want to look at the interior silence. So we'll try to get there. All right, let's look for a little bit at the world we live in. And what do we mean by a noisy world? Well, each one of us, we have to deal with, we have some sort of business to organize. It could be the business of our own home. It could be the business of a company. But there's some sort of work that we're trying to accomplish, and that works on the mind. I mean, my father's a carpenter, and when I was in the seminary as a seminarian, I was in charge of the wood shop, and I enjoyed it a lot. But you start building a project, and it's always on your mind. You know, would the joint be best this way or that way? How long? What kind of wood? And it just runs. If you're not careful, it just plays in your mind constantly until you work it out and it's built, and then you're on to the next project. But if we live our whole life like that, and we don't know how to shut it off, then we live in a noisy world. That's why, yes, we want to be able to give serious attention to what we're doing, but in a certain way, some of the authors say, do not allow yourself to give complete, full attention to anything but God. Now, I'm not saying don't do well your job. Of course we do our job well, but save something of you for God. Make sure that while you're doing your work, and maybe it takes your full mental capacity, you might not be able to be thinking about God explicitly as you do a math problem, but your heart can be focused on God. That prayer of the heart. Or I'm doing this for God. And when the time comes to stop, then I will stop doing this for God as well. So that all day long we ever only do one thing, which is serve God. Not serve self, not I'm going to do this and I have to do that, all our list of projects. You know, we may have checklists, but really in our mind it should be one unified thing. I serve God. You might think, well, that would be much easier in a convent or a monastery. It's true, it is easier. But it's not so easy. I mean, I've preached to the Carmelite nuns, their cloister. I've preached a retreat there. You can't even see them. You're talking through a double grill and a curtain. You just see shapes on the other side. When they come by for consultation one-on-one, you don't even see it. It's just a thick curtain. You can't see it. It's just a voice. They don't tell you their name. You're just talking to a soul. But it's not always easy for them to have interior silence. People look and say, well, what are the monks or the nuns? All they do is pray all day long. Somebody's got to cook. Somebody's got to clean. Somebody's got to, order whatever needs to be had for the community. Somebody's got to answer the door. The phone, they have phone hours even for Carmel. 30 minutes a day. That's when they answer the phone. If you don't call in those 30 minutes, you're not going to get them. And if you do call in those 30 minutes, you might not get them either. It just depends, right? But the point being, they still have to make an effort at an interior life, even in the cloister. Otherwise, you can grow attached to particular tasks, which are not God. They may be done for God, but the task is not God. Our heart must be attached to our Lord. Everything has to be for Him. And our will is made to grab hold of things like our hand. It's made to grab hold and is made to be able to let go. Some people have a hard time grabbing hold to begin with. They're making the decision to do something. I don't know. Everybody's a little different. The cholerics have no problem grabbing hold of something. All right? And they're very happy to beat others with it. Right? Whereas the phlegmatics, I don't know. I really have to choose that. Convince me. Right? So, our will is meant to be able to grab hold. And that's hard for some and easy for others. And our will is meant to be able to let go. And that's hard for some and easier for others. All right? We have to practice it on all levels. And it's ultimately because we want to be able to take hold of ourselves with both hands. We want to be able to have such a mastery of self. And not to be mastered by the world or just thrown about by our circumstances, but to have such a mortified mastery of ourselves that we can take hold of ourselves with both hands and then drop ourselves at the feet of our God. That's what we desire. All right? To be able to kneel before our Lord. And the business and the bills and the emails, all right, constant chirping and tweeting and everything else that goes on on the phone. All right, the social media, all right, the worry about paying your taxes, the traffic, the expectations of family and friends, all of that does tend to play on us. And if we don't make a conscious effort to remain God-centered, there's no guarantee that we will. We can be, you can have someone who's a good person who does not have good control of him or herself, who doesn't have an interior silence, and therefore has a very hard time finding God. They say that St. Ignatius Loyola, who of course gave us the spiritual exercises, they say that he was so focused when he started mental prayer that normally he could find God within 15 minutes. But it still took some work. I don't know. Have you prayed your rosary yet today? How many decades did you get through before you thought of God again? I'm not saying it necessarily was that way, but it can certainly happen to very good people. It can happen to priests. It can happen. It's sometimes you'll get people who say, "Father, something's got to be terribly wrong with me. I didn't really think about the mystery until I got to I was already the fourth decade. I think I must be losing my soul." Well, if you are, I guess I am too. It's not like this is easy for all of us. We have to make a conscious effort. At the seminary that I went to, where I was formed in Winona, Minnesota, there was a big image of St. Peter Martyr at the outside of the church, carved in the stone, and he was just doing this as you walk up to the church, just saying, "Be quiet, leave everything else outside, leave the worries here, think of God," and that's come on in. Not a word. That's right. Come on in. If we don't have enough chairs, there should be a couple back there. But anyway, you want. So, we have to make this effort to seek our God. And after a while, you end up with people like a St. Philip Neri. That was, I think in that case, it was a bit of an exception, but they say that for him, you've heard about how he'd have cats running around the altar, things like that. Not to be recommended is, imitated, but they say that at times he had animals like this running around the church because he needed something to distract him enough to keep him from going into ecstasy before the Mass was over, and the Mass taking forever. Right? So out of charity to everyone else, he'd allow a few distractions to keep himself grounded. Obviously, that's the exception, not the rule. For most of us, it's the other problem. Right? So we do live in a noisy world, and I think deep down we know that. And the more the technology has not, as much as it makes certain things easier, it has not quieted down our life at all. And sometimes the technology can be very, very helpful. But it can also be, I think it's something we have to at times make an explicit decision. I'm not going to listen to music or to an audiobook or something like that for the next 15 minutes on this drive. I'm not saying audio, you listen to, if you're listening to good music or you're listening to a good audiobook, of course it can feed the soul. And you know, they've got the Summa Theologica of St. Thomas Aquinas, the whole thing, on Audible. There are plenty of good things out there. I think each one of those is like 36 hours long or 38 hours long. There's plenty of good there's plenty of good material for reading out there, but it's very easy to have it set up where the moment you get in your car, your phone connect, Bluetooth connection to your stereo, and before you've even put it into drive, the audio is already playing, and it plays the whole time, and you never have a chance just to think a little, and that's a risk. And of course, the world's always telling us the world will never pay attention to you unless you make yourself known. So you kind of have to make a noise in the world. You have to put yourself out there. You have to somehow, sell yourself in the sense that you have to sell your talents and your qualities, speak enough about yourself that you are known by people around you so that they'll hire you and all the rest. And there's a risk to us there. All right, so we want to take some of that pressure off. The world is putting pressure one way. We want to put a counter pressure and say, we're in a time of Advent, we're in a time of silence. We need to make time for prayer. We need, during this time of the summer, when hopefully we do have a little more time. Maybe many have their jobs and it's the same amount of work as it was before. All right, but some perhaps are out of uni for a while. If you don't put some extra, all year long we can be thinking, I wish I had more time for God. I wish I had more time for prayer. And we finally get that time. And if we don't right away put God in there, it will fill up with everything else. All right? So now is the time to say, all right, we're in Advent. Let's make a little extra time for prayer, particularly quiet mental prayer. One of these days, maybe we can give some pointers on, some of the techniques, if you want, although it's not all about technique, but some of the techniques that the saints have recommended or that they have found helpful for themselves. Maybe we'll get a time for a little bit of, a few questions and answers at the end of this class even. But it's something we can come back to. There is a great book if you can ever find it. I don't know if you can buy it in Australia easily or not, but it's called The Prayer of Love and Silence. The Prayer of Love and Silence. There's a lot that's
Who wrote it so
I think it's just written by a Carthusian. They don't even put a name on it often. It's just written by a Carthusian. The Prayer of Love and Silence.
Who's the publisher?
Scepter, I think. That's just off the top of my head. I think it's Scepter Publications.
Is it Opus 10?
What's that?
Is that Opus 10?
I don't know. Could be. I don't know. I never recommend anything by them. If it's a good book, it's a good book. I don't care who publishes it. And it's a good one. There's a whole section on the prayer life, and then it's like the chapter, at a monastery, the little talks that they gave a chapter day after day. So they're short little things. It's actually great for meditation. They've got a whole chapter on religious obsessions, how souls who give their life to God can suddenly begin to obsess about one thing or another. It can be something good, but it can throw off their whole balance. And the devil is very happy to get us attached to something good if that's going to throw off the balance in everything else. Right? So it's just one example of the kind of thing that's covered there. That's not, unfortunately, we don't have it here yet, but maybe at one point. All right, so we want to be silent in the interior life. We want to, if we can say it that way, we want to let silence speak. We almost want to make us a friend of silence, of silencium. Make him one of our friends. Give him time, and every day. St. Bruno says of the benefits that solitude and silence of the desert afford, he says, only those who have experienced it can know. Only those who have experienced the silence of the desert can know the good that it can do. Think of your first retreat. You're going to say, I have to go, I'm going on retreat, a nation retreat. How am I going to be silent for 5 days? But what's the purpose? Why do I have to turn off my cell phone? Why do I have to? And then you do it and you realize, I had no idea that God was saying so much all my life. That God would speak and give such attention to me in a single 5-day period. I never knew God was so active around me because I was never silent like this before. Again, Father Madden, the Carmelite. So it's always good if you want to talk about silence. Let's look at those who were silent. Look at the Trappists, for example. I think they take it's a vow of silence where they don't talk unless they have to. Father Raymond wrote a great book about the Trappist Foundation in the United States. Burnt Out Incense. It's an easy read, but full of wisdom. Burnt Out Incense. It's the 3rd volume in a whole trilogy that he wrote about religious life. All right, so only those who've experienced it can know, which means the only way, if you don't know the power of silence yet, the only way you're ever going to be convinced really is to jump in and try it. Is to trust God enough to put yourself alone with Him. Here's another quote from Father Madden. Living today is a chaotic struggle at high speed. The faster people go, the more noise they make. And the more noise they make, the better they feel. For they are afraid of silence. Silence makes them think. And they do not want to think. Because when they do, their thought processes gradually sweep them before the unwavering eyes of a just God. They do not like that at all. It hurts, it frightens. So they run and shout, always pretending. Like little boys, they whistle themselves past a cemetery, pretending it's not there. How many times we pretend like we're okay. We pretend like we're fine. We pretend like we're at peace. And in fact, there's turmoil inside. And it's like the little boy who's afraid of the dead, afraid of the cemetery, and he whistles his way past, acting like, no, I'm just fine. He's not just fine, that's why he's whistling. And it's the same thing often in our soul. And we'll fill the day with all sorts of wholesome, what we think are wholesome activities, even works of charity sometimes, rather than spend 5 minutes of silence before God. And that's a big mistake. If we're doing all sorts of good works, if we're doing all sorts of teaching, apologetics, writing, if we're doing all sorts of those things, but we're not spending time with God, then we're missing the point. The soul of any apostolate is the soul of Jesus Christ. Any apostolate worth anything is the work of Christ. And if he's going to use us, the hammer doesn't do anything if it just sits on the shelf. It has to be in the hand of the one who strikes the blow. And the one who strikes the blow in any true Catholic apostolate is Christ. The one who does the work is Christ. If we're not in union with Christ, if we're not in Christ's hands by prayer, by an interior life, then it's not his work. And the fruit is not going to last. There's another great book called on the interior life. It's a classic in the interior life called The Soul of the Apostolate. If you haven't read it before, that's probably the place to start, of the books that I mentioned. All right, The Soul of the Apostolate by Dom Chotard. It was the bedside reading of St. Pius X. And it's true, once you've read it through cover to cover, then you could just put it by your bed and just read a little here and there. All right, but The Soul of the Apostolate. you have to, like anything deep, you have to commit a little bit of time to it. There'll probably be a couple sessions of reading before it really starts grabbing you. But it's impressive. All right, a couple quotes from there. This was from an eminent statesman. Those who pray do more for the world than those who fight. And if the world goes from bad to worse, it's because there are more battles than prayers. And we want to make a difference in the world, then we have to believe in the power of prayer. We have to believe in the power of Christ. It's his work, not ours. Bossuet says, hands lifted up smash up more battalions than hands that strike. Again, this is from the author Dom Chautard. A short but fervent prayer will usually promote a conversion far better than long discussions and fine speeches. It doesn't mean we don't do apologetics. It doesn't mean that we don't debate with someone, that we don't explain something. We do. But don't forget to pray for the person. Don't forget to afterwards or even during, and you often, if their heart isn't softening, pray to their guardian angel to soften their heart. Our words will mean nothing if they don't open their soul to them. They may be true, but it's not going to change. We cannot touch the heart. We can throw out syllables that hit their eardrum, but we can't touch their heart. Only God can do that. And God wants to do that, but he wants us to pray. He wants us to say, I know that all of my study, all of my efforts will do nothing without you, Lord. I need you. He loves to hear us say that we recognize that we need him. And ultimately, what are we doing there? We're going right to the primary cause. Again, this is Dom Chautard. He who prays is dealing with the primary cause. He acts directly on it. Thus, he goes higher than all secondary causes, since it is only from the first principle that they hold their efficacy. Consequently, the desired result is then gained more surely and more quickly. So, in a certain sense, rather than saying, I'm going to grab the broom and take the head of it and try to sweep the floor with it, all right? Instead, no, we grab the broom by the handle, which allows the full leverage when it comes to that tool. When we're trying to touch a soul, yes, the arguments and all that, that's all like the end of the tool. But we want, if we pray, we go right, we grab the whole work by the source of the power. We go right to God and say, you made the prayer, you gave us the truth, and you made this soul. And please touch this soul. Right? So there's all sorts in here, which is beautiful. But I have to keep moving. So, what about life itself? You know, we've all studied, first in grade school, then in high school and uni. Perhaps you've studied particular things for your job or for your vocation, and that's all good. But ultimately, we know that there are lessons that we only learn by living. There are life lessons that we only learn by struggling through. What was the condition for learning in school but silence? If you weren't quiet, if you weren't listening in the classroom, if the whole class was wild and rambunctious, it was hard to learn anything. And similarly with life, we risk letting the very lessons that God wants to teach us by life itself, we risk missing those if we don't have time for some silence. That's why I think from time to time, whether it's at home or whether it's in the car or whether it's going for a walk, from time to time, we need to just make a conscious effort. I'm not going to fill it with noise. I'm just going to look at life a little. And of course, everybody is a little different, the way that people do that. For some, a diary or something is a big help. For other people, it just turns them in on themselves and it becomes something sometimes very selfish. For some, it really is they're unraveling all their emotions so that they can see clearly and order it. That can be. I think a lot of young women find that really helpful. But it could be the wrong way. It could be done the wrong way, where it becomes life is all about me and how people are persecuting me. That's not going to be healthy for anyone either. Right? So our silence even has to be ordered towards God. And with men, silence is different sorts. A lot of times we just like to clear the mind. And when we clear the mind, a lot of times we really clear the mind. What are you thinking about? Nothing. And we mean it. But we really, nothing. Well, that's probably not going to be really productive. I'm not saying there's not a space for the nothing box. All right? But if we can find something that's very light, so think about it, for example, the difference between you get a married couple, and they have an argument or some sort of misunderstanding, and it's been a hurtful thing. And what does she want to do? The wife, she wants to bring it up and put it to rest, only to bring it up again and to put it to rest again and again and again and again, because it takes, are you still sorry? Are you sure you're sorry? I'm sorry. Are you, and that's just partly the way a woman is made. She needs to work through it. It takes more time in that regard. And she wants, at very least, even a virtuous woman, she wants a direct answer. It's just, the man often will go, I didn't apologize, but not directly. But, she can tell it. She can tell that I'm okay with it now, or that, that we're back to normal. How can she tell? Well, I smiled at her today. I'm sure that just told her everything is fine. No, it's just, men and women are so different. But a man often likes to solve problems sideways. And a woman likes to attack it, straight on, head on. Right? So, it's very true. I preach marriage retreats. And it's you can get couples that have arguments on marriage retreats. Go make up. So with men, it's true that there is a sense in which we tend to work through life's problems sideways. Most of our attention is given to some sort of a light recreation. And in the background, spooling in the background, is the solution to life's problems. There's a time and place for that. That's the way we're wired. But there's also a time and place for saying, no, I'm going to look at this before God. Or I'm going to let God look in this, and I'm going to open it for him to see. Right? So we have to each know ourselves and find some way that opens us to the lessons that silence wants to teach us, that God wants to teach us through silence. All right. External silence, what do we mean by that? Well, it's pretty obvious. All right. It's not having a lot of noise around us on the outside, noise that strikes the ears. You can ask it this way, though. Is external silence, is it a positive thing or a negative thing in itself? Is it just an absence of noise, so a negative thing? Or is it something positive in its own right? I think it's more positive than negative. Silence is what exists before we clutter it up. Silence is something positive. I think this is Father Madden. He says, we cannot hope that silence will subdue noise. We do not believe it's possible. But we do believe that if people said less, made less noise, they would be wiser. Noise and talk have not made us less human, but they have made us less wise. Because of it, we have sometimes crippled the growth of our culture and impeded the development of our knowledge. I know one priest in the United States, good priest, very deep. He doesn't say much. He doesn't show much emotion. There is a lot there underneath when you get to know him. You can tell when he's upset or when he's heated, if you know him well, because his fingers start to sweat. But you never see it on his face. We'd come out of a meeting and say, "You think I was too hard? You think I was too angry?" You didn't raise your voice at all. I knew that you were heating up because your fingers were sweating. And I only knew that because he told me when I start doing this, it's because it's all boiling inside. All right. But he's profound, and he told me once. He said, "I don't think anything great has been done in the world since they invented email." Because there's not enough focus on anything. Obviously, email has its place, and we don't all have to do it. His practice, he was principal of a school, and he'd go, "It's been 5 days since I checked my emails." What do your teachers do if they can try to get a hold of you? I have an office. They can come knock. We don't all have to do that, but I respect it. There's something there. All right? So, the antithesis of silence is noise. And the greatest single enemy of silence is conversation, or talk. That's one of the reasons why nuns or monks get so much done in a day. Because they don't talk. I mean, they talk at a meal, at a certain time of the meal, and then they're back to work. It's amazing what you can fit in a day when you don't feel guilty for not creating lots and lots of small talk at every time you pass someone. Now, it's true that there is a time and place for small talk, and that's fine, but it's not all the time. In the seminaries or the convent, they eat in silence. Or at least they don't talk. There's a table reading. Amazing how much you can accomplish how much you can learn when at every meal there's a reading, all right, and it's being read by someone there. I mean, they take turns. The rest are eating while one reads. Now, don't try to make your home a monastery, but at least value the silence that's there. Here's Father Madden again. Some people talk as naturally as champagne bubbles. As of 1954, the average American is said to use about 30,000 words during an ordinary day, the equivalent of a fair-sized book. Probably not worth publishing. Here's a quote from a Bishop, Francis Clement Kelly. He wrote some books and short stories I really enjoy. He says, "The noisy boy is a delight. The noisy man is a nuisance." That's true. The biggest noise, he says, the biggest noise is always made by the biggest failure. What really hits the headline is not sanctity, it's scandal. So be careful with trying to be well known by everybody. Normally that means that there's compromise somewhere. Again, he goes on. He's giving advice. It's a little book called Letters to John, all right, to his nephew. This bishop's writing letters to his nephew. Letters to Jack. Letters to Jack. He says, "Don't be noisy enough to make people think you are. Don't be noisy enough to make people think you are not genuine, but don't be quiet enough to make them think you are a non-entity or afraid." Right, so there's a balance there too. So I would say that silence is a positive thing. It's something that we want to achieve. It's something we must desire if we're going to achieve it. And the Carthusian warns us that silence takes effort. He says, keeping silence is not a spontaneous attitude. It demands a conscious decision on our part. In order to enter into silence, we must really want it. And above all, know why one wants to keep silent. We have to desire it. It doesn't just happen. Some of the things that it helps us accomplish, it helps us make sense of life. silence. It helps us lead our life rather than getting swept along by other people and by circumstances. Right? Where we're just reacting rather than acting, planning. No, we're just reacting to everything. No. So silence helps us there. It helps us find true joy in life. Because what is happiness? It's the recognition of the goods that we possess. It's recognizing, it's not just having goods, it's recognizing and reflecting upon the fact that I have goods. That's what brings happiness. That's why you can have someone who's spoiled rotten. They've got all the goods they could ever want, but they never think about it or appreciate it, and so it doesn't bring them happiness. Silence allows that, a reflection on what we have, what we've been given. And it brings gratitude, which brings happiness. It goes hand in hand with happiness. It brings a certain peace. And that allows people to approach us. If we're agitated, think about it you go walk down the street. I notice it in the airports as a priest. If I'm in a rush and I put my head down and sometimes we use it on purpose, right? I mean, there's a time and place for it. If I know I need to get the sacristy to start Mass on time, and I have to start over here when there are people coming for Sunday Mass all in between. If I need to get to the sacristy on time, all you have to do is look agitated and put your head down. Look rather intense, and everyone will leave you alone. If you look like that all the time, no one will ever approach you and ask for help. So we have to be careful. Yes.
I don't know if you know Cardinal Robert Surra.
He wrote a book on this.
Yeah.
I haven't read it yet, but I read little bits of it.
It's pretty good. He quotes a lot of the fathers.
What's the name of it again?
The Power of Silence.
The Power of Silence. Yeah. Yeah. No, I stumbled. There was a priest that gave me a couple quotes from it some years back. It was what I read of it was impactful. I don't know the whole thing.
Yeah, no, it's pretty solid.
Yeah. Well, it's ultimately it's just basics of the spiritual life. But it's not so obvious these days. All right, the silence helps us show consideration for others and their pursuits. It often brings companions with it, like depth and knowledge. It's hard to have a deep heart if there's never any silence. It's one of the things with the modern music. I think it feeds a superficial, sentimental approach to love. So even when it's not out and out, I'm talking modern pop and stuff like that, even when it's not out and out sexual in nature and therefore wrong, and often it is that, but even when it's not that, it tends to feed a superficial, sentimental, shallow love. And that, if that's what we feed ourselves on in youth, we're cheating. You're cheating your future spouse and your future children. They deserve a mother, a father who knows how to love deeply. And that's why I think a lot of this modern music, when we attack it, we attack the real problems, but do we really go deep enough? It goes deeper than just 6th and 9th. Although that's a real problem. All right. The exterior silence obviously leads us to the interior silence. Yes.
We say that the news is one of the worst things on television, even when it's not full of opinion and innuendo, which it usually is. Even if it's true, it's usually a lot of junk we don't need to know anyway.
A lot of truth there. Yeah. And especially when it's fear-mongering and all the rest. And let's face it, it's interesting. Politics can be interesting. The news can be interesting. They know how to grab attention. But you're right. No, that's a big one. We have to be careful. All right, internal silence. What do we mean there? I'll try to keep this a little shorter. All right, although it is the heart of it all. All right, by interior silence, we mean silence in the mind and in the heart. A certain peace, a certain rest there. It's the great prize that we seek through external silence. If there are times when we just turn off everything, it's so that we can try to achieve this interior silence. Silence braces the sinews of the soul, says one of the authors I've been quoting. It reinforces powers of the mind. We see that on retreat. I've seen preaching the retreats over the years, the Ignatian retreats, in silence. You get people where grown men. They'll come on retreat and they run businesses and everything else, and they are capable men. And they get on retreat, and they're busy and all that. They get on retreat, and within sometimes 4 or 5 hours of silence, they're in tears across your desk as they open their soul. Because they're finally seeing it for the first time, or they're finally allowing God to work. It's really impressive. The women start crying before the retreat starts. No, it's... But I tell them, because they always feel embarrassed. They sit down and they start crying. Father, I don't know why I'm crying. I haven't even started. We got this little button back here that says tears on it. I can push it anytime I want. And you'll start crying for no apparent reason. It's all right. If that's what it takes, I knew one of the it wasn't a nun here, but one of the nuns back in the States. She said, Father, I'm afraid that I'm kind of like Faramir in Lord of the Rings. You can only reach me through a waterfall. Lots of tears first, and then you can actually get to the heart and see what's going on, whatever it takes. I had another young woman who came in at one point, and she sat down, and I could tell there was something on her mind, and she asked for the appointment, and she talked about a couple different things, but it was not, it was not the issue. But she finished, and I said, anything else? And she said, I think I'm good. Did you come for anything else? And she said, nothing else that I can tell you without crying. So I grabbed the Kleenex box and I shoved it across the desk. Come on, get it out. And she did. And she needed to. Right? If that's what it takes, that's what it takes. It's fine. All right? But we do have to know how to open the soul. I think, really, it's not for no apparent reason. You open the soul, even men, but you open the soul, and there's something there that's sacred. Especially when it comes to a vocation, choice of state of life, something like that. You open the soul there. Is it really any surprise when we open the very depths of our heart that there's a little shaking that goes on? It's normal. All right. In actual fact, silence calls for a tranquil listening of the heart. This is St. Bruno. A tranquil listening of the heart that allows God to enter through all its doors and passages. That's what silence does.
Excuse me.
Yes.
A well-known parish church here in Sydney. Parish priest. This is St. Joseph's at Camperdown.
Okay.
It's very conveniently located because behind it is the entire Sydney University campus.
Okay.
In front of that is the hospital.
So what's the question?
Another question, making statement.
Okay.
The priest there has got 24/7 adoration for the Blessed Sacrament. And if you go to confession with him, for example, he tells you to spend even an hour before the Blessed Sacrament.
Good.
Say anything, not pray rosary, cram half a dozen litanies or whatever, or novenas.
Just be there with our Lord.
Quiet. Quiet. And before the Blessed Sacrament. And people who are not even Catholic, they go there and they sit down and they experience so much.
They just pray.
And they just pray. Look, they don't know much about the faith. They come out so invigorated, and so many of them convert.
No, it's beautiful.
From the hospital and from the university.
We do need the silence.
St. Joseph's Camperdown.
It's true. All right. No, we do need the silence. Find the time for it. Here's another St. Bruno quote. Silence is a listening, not the feverish expectation of a word that would strike our ears or fill our heart, but a calm receptivity to Him who is present and who works noiselessly in our inmost being. That is why it is said that our solitude is holy ground, a place where, as a man with his friend, the Lord and his servant often speak together. That's the type of positive silence we're looking for. It combines an absence of words on the lips and in the heart with a living dialogue with our Lord. That's a Carthusian quote. All right, so an absence of words, all right, on the lips and in the heart, so we're not worried about other things. All right, just a listening silence, a living dialogue, speech, conversation with our Lord. Again, a Carthusian, silence is precisely the quality of listening that enables us to savor God without the necessity of saying new things. Sometimes just to look at Him. He's the creator. I'm the creature. And He allows me in His presence. That's enough. I don't need to say anything more. Archbishop Lefebvre compared prayer to A child that lays his head on his mother's heart. You know the child is united to his mother. He doesn't say anything. He might not even know how to speak, but you know the child is united to his mother, because if you take the child away, he cries. And it's very similar with prayer. We don't always have to be saying something. We don't always have to be following some sort of a structure. There is a time and place for vocal prayer, and there is a time and place for the structure of mental prayer. But there is also a time and place of just resting in God, resting on the Sacred Heart. Tell St. John the Apostle he's had a couple thousand years, move over, all right? And I want to place my head for a while in the Sacred Heart. That's sometimes all we have to do. And then you listen to that heart beat with love for you and with love for everyone that you know. Everyone that you love. All right, I'm going to move to the last section. All right, a plan for keeping silent. Firstly, we have to remember not to get discouraged. It doesn't happen overnight. We're not creating it from scratch. All we have to do is be quiet, and it will happen with God's help. But it still takes effort to be quiet. All right, so Carthusian says, true silence is not the flower of a day that is picked at the outset. You don't plant the seed and think it's going to sprout tomorrow. It's a fruit that ripens as the prize of long and costly efforts. So don't give up, or you'll never get the fruit. Or it'll just be the little tiny fruit. Sometimes God will bless us right away with a period of silence. Make it easy for a while. Well, take advantage of that. Don't think it's going to last, though. You'll have to fight for it. So courage. We have to carry on. In Latin, we say fac silentium. That's the way we would say be quiet. We say be quiet in English. In Latin, it's make silence. Fac, F-A-C, all right? From faci, it's the singular for do it. Make this. Make silence, like you make music. All right. So set a time aside. What can you do? You can set a time aside each day. Maybe sometime today, before you go to rest, you look and say, well, what time of day, if I wanted to choose a little time every day, when would be a little time for silence? On my way to work, well, that's all right. Better yet, if you can just be the silence, sitting somewhere where you're not focused on anything. If you're driving, you're still traffic signs and everything else. It's better than nothing. But it's not the same thing as 5 minutes alone looking at your crucifix in the privacy of your own room. All right, a little time without noise to reflect, to consult with God, and then to plan the day. If you're doing it for Him, we should consult Him, I think. Part of that's just fidelity to morning prayer. Get to bed on time so that you can get up a little bit early so that you can pray before you work. Sounds hard. But it can make the difference of a life. They say that really, what keeps a life order are the bookends. A time to go to bed and a time to get up. Then you can rearrange the books in between, but keep the bookends. You might have a weekday time and a weekend time, but set the bookends the best you can. A retreat from time to time. There's still a men's retreat coming up in Goulburn, and there's a women's retreat, I think in January, February. They're open to anybody who wants to sign up. They are amazing. It's 5 days. It can be life-changing. To enter into silence is, in fact, to meet God in His own house. How many words a day does God say? How many words did God say from all eternity?
1 word.
1 word. The Word of God. The second person of the Blessed Trinity. And that word says everything. Right? So, wow, we're already out of time. It's all right. Yes. We'll leave the last example I had alone. Do you have any quick questions? Yes?
You'll render an account of every person with the. Can you explain that?
Yeah, so, I mean, I would say that it doesn't mean that there's no room for small talk at all, but there has to be a proper purpose for everything that God has given us for a reason. If we misuse anything He's given us, it's a fault. Sometimes it's imperfection, sometimes it's venial sin, sometimes it's mortal sin. But yes, if we just waste time and waste breath, we're wasting life God gave us. So I'm not saying count your words, but I think it's the way of Scripture saying, be careful. It's not just what you do that God's going to judge you on. It's also what you think, what you say, and what you leave undone. Right?
Because he adds more to it, right? So he says you'll be acquitted, but you'll also be condemned. So
Yeah, I have to look at this precision. Yeah, the precise.
is he referring to like calumny and detraction?
It's possible. Certainly, there are levels of speech. You can have just useless speech, and you can have harmful speech, right? I'm afraid I can't go deeper than that without just making it up until I take a look at the
So
Scripture.
gossip and all that, that's a mortal sin, right?
What's that?
Gossip and calumny and detraction.
It depends again on the gravity of the matter. So if you say, she is such a, my cousin is so lazy. She doesn't get up until 9 in the morning. Venial sin, right? I mean, you reveal, if you speak ill of another in a venial way, it's a venial sin. If you speak really badly of someone, if you reveal the hidden mortal sin of another person without sufficient cause, that's a mortal sin. You say, oh yeah, do you know she's messing around with this guy? Yeah, every night she's out there. Does anyone else have a right to know that? No. Unless it's your parents or something like that. If there's a sufficient cause, you can. But just to go talking about it, to reveal the hidden mortal sins of another person without necessity, which the world, I'm afraid, does all the time, it's mortal sin. To reveal the hidden venial sins of another person without necessity, venial sin. To reveal the imperfections of another person without necessity, imperfection. Yeah?
Sometimes you're helping someone making a decision or you're protecting someone.
Yes. So if there's sufficient cause, yeah? So whenever it's revealing the hidden fault of another person without sufficient cause or sin, sometimes there's sufficient cause. I think often we do actually try to justify too much. We do have to be careful. But there can be times where you look and say, don't date him. He's a mess. No, he's wonderful. No, he's not. or she's not. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to hurt anybody. I'm just trying to save you from a miserable life. And you're looking to date him? He does drugs and everybody around him knows it. Sometimes you have to do something like that. But you also have to be very careful of what the motive is. Right? If you're in love with the same person, and it's really so that they'll be free to love you, well, bad motive. Right? I mean, you do want to care about people, but you have to look at what's the motive here, right? So it's one example. Other questions?
I think any gossip is not good. Any gossip at all, like talking about another person badly, is definitely a no-no.
That's right. No,
just
if
keep
you're
silent, like exactly what you said before.
Yeah. If you're speaking ill of them, it's, let's say, without sufficient cause. It's wrong. But there are sometimes where you have a duty to speak. There can come a time where you have a responsibility for someone. Let's say you're the oldest one in the group of friends, and this young person is really being pulled down their own path. You might have to sometimes, in charity, go to their parents. You might warn them first, and if they don't correct, then you go to their parents and say, your child's at risk.
I think the hardest part is trying to make restitution if you have really damaged someone's good name.
What's that?
Making restitution for it afterwards would be the hard bit.
It's very hard to make restitution when you've pulled someone's good name down. So we have to be really careful. You're right. It's, the gossip, which is normally talking about real, faults that are known. Even if everybody knows it, we don't just go rattling off about it. Why do we often do that? Why do we enjoy that? It just makes us feel a little bit better about ourselves. Somebody else has faults too. And the focus is on them, not on my faults. Well, otherwise, why do we enjoy it? The people do. They love to share gossip. It's a problem.
Nothing else to talk about.
Yeah. Often. They don't have enough silence to actually have something worthwhile to say.
But if you were to say something good all the time, they will probably have nothing to say.
Could be. Be
But
careful, we don't
try
want to
it.
be too harsh.
I've
though.
tried before. That's why I can do small talk.
No, I know what you mean though. Yeah, I mean, I think we would be better off saying a little less, especially when Compline is in 2 minutes. So I have to go to Compline, but it was wonderful having you all. You're welcome to join us for Compline as you are every time, but you're also welcome just to talk out here or to take on. Let's say a prayer. In the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Ghost, amen. Glory be to the Father and to the Son and to the Holy Ghost.
As it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen.
Saint Pius X.
Pray for us.
If you kneel down, I'll give you a blessing. Benedictio Dei omnipotentis, Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti, descendat super vos et manet semper. Amen. Thanks so much. We'll see you next year.